Hey nerds, we are going to do a review and breakdown of Star Wars The Acolyte, Episode 6, starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Social. I am Colin.
And I'm Nathan.
David is away on vacation, but it's nice to have Nathan here to discuss this episode of The Acolyte. So, the spoiler free logline of this episode is: on a distant island, unsettling questions about identity and destiny arise. So, Nathan, what are your thoughts about this latest episode of The Acolyte?
I thought it was pretty good. It was definitely a downgrade from last week, but it's not a surprising downgrade. I think I managed my expectations more than most people. At the end of last week, people thought they were going to get the flashback episode, but I knew from the Entertainment Weekly article that we weren't going to get that until next week. So I expected this to be a bridge episode. There were highlights like the stranger thirst trap in the middle of the episode that we can talk about. I do have some larger criticisms of the structure of the season that we can get into, which I think is contributing to the people who have legitimate concerns about the show. I'm putting aside the people who review bomb the show before seeing a single episode. And I was looking at Leslie Heslin's resume. She's a good writer. I think it's just that this isn't the format that she's used to, and we can talk about that a little bit more later.
Yeah, I feel the same way as you do, Nathan, about the whole season. Is that there are definitely some ups and downs. There's some really novel things that they tried that I really appreciate. I really like the thought that it's during the High Republic era. I really like the fact that they are introducing several new worlds, introducing a very strange character, droids that are strange, characters that are more gray than just black and white. But there are some inconsistencies. Like in this episode, it was, when are they going to get to the end? There's some good reveals here and there. Great. But it just dragged. And I was like, why can't this be scrunched and get to the point to maybe a 20-minute episode? Or maybe this could have been cut to make it part of episode 5. Or it could be just, hey, combine 6 and 7 so that this would be more compelling plot lines instead of just this, oh, I'm just going to leave this here for you and then wait till next week. So I feel a little frustrated because of that. I don't want to get into too much toxicity because it's not that at all, because I love representation. I love the fact that they have a lot of people that are not always represented, especially our antagonists and our protagonists being Asian.
I mean, yeah, the main two plot points in this show, they're all people of color. Our teacher and our corruptor, and the people being taught and corrupted, they're all people of color. So that's cool to see. But the story has to be there as well. And the story is there in places, in other places it isn't. I actually don't have that much of an issue with nothing much happening here. My issue, like I said, is the structure of the show. Leslie Headland did Russian Doll. She knows how to do a show. That show is exceptional. If no one's seen it, go check it out on Netflix. But Netflix has a very different release model than this. And you have to structure shows that release weekly in a completely different way. This would have done well as a binge release if you're going to make it into a show. Or, honestly, these episodes are really short. I think at the end, we might have 2 hours of content. This would have been a good movie. And it wouldn't really matter that there are parts where we slow down and think the characters know each other, like in this episode, because this would have been like 20 minutes of the movie, and then we'd get the reveal of what happened right after that, instead of having to wait a week.
Exactly. Yeah. So, having said all that, what rating do you want to give it for this episode?
I think there's definitely a lot of things to actually discuss. This was a slower part, in the switching off of the characters, as we saw at the end of the last episode, did set up some interesting conversations. Given that, I'd give it a dinner party at 7, because there are things that you can really discuss at a dinner party in this episode. It didn't reach the high highs of last week, but it wasn't terrible. There are definitely interesting things that we can talk about in this episode. So.
Yeah, I think that I will also give it a 7, even with the thirst trap. 7 is a good rating for this. There's definitely some good things happening, but it's just not enough. And I was just like, why did they leave it like that? Or why is it that they did this and did this? And that makes no sense. And also some of the things that may be revealed is pretty obvious.
I do suggest people read the Entertainment Weekly article that came out last week. It looks like they coordinated with Entertainment Weekly before the show came out because they dropped that and they had interviews with them the next morning that it came out because it drops out at 9 p.m. The day before. And there's no way that they got those interviews the day of. So they coordinated with Entertainment Weekly. In that interview, she said the reveal was not supposed to be surprising, and the reveal of who his master is probably isn't supposed to be surprising either. I think what the Jedi did on that planet Brendok 16 years ago, that's going to be surprising because I have no idea what that is. If you have an idea of who the master is or who his master was, that's because they told you, but you have no idea what happened on that planet. I think that's going to be the surprise next week.
All right. If you like what we talk about with Star Wars The Acolyte and other content that we put out, please like, share, subscribe for more of this. We really appreciate your support, and we're growing as a channel, so please help us out there. Spoilers ahead. Let's look at the clip. So you can see clearly that there is some type of whipping motion that's here.
You could say also that he got slashed, but it's a really irregular scar for a slash. It really looks like something that was looser than a blade that slashed across his back, and it looks something like a whip. Who has a whip? So when people are mad that they were able to guess, but I feel like they wouldn't have put the scar in that kind of pattern and also have the whip in the same episode if they didn't want you to guess that.
True. So, and also it was revealed here that he was a former Jedi.
Yeah.
People would have speculated, oh, he must have been Soul's apprentice, but it doesn't seem that way.
Soul isn't that old, though. I think Soul is a regular human. And she is over 150 years old now. Mm-hmm. When Osha says, I've never heard of you before, and he said it was a long time ago, I would have heard of you. And then he says, it was a very long time ago. So he might look human, but maybe he's not. Maybe he's a longer-lived species. So yeah, it looks like it's going to be Vanestra, because I don't think Soul knows who he is. But I might be wrong. If there's a mixture, it could be his Sith master who did that to him.
Do you think that he does have a Sith master or not at this point?
Well, we talked about that last week. I think it's possible. I think that he's the apprentice, and he's not the master. But there's also speculation that he's going to be the first Knight of Ren. Maybe he was a Sith, and he broke off from his master, and because his master abused him, the reason he has a scar on his back. So maybe there's a master. That is actually a real mystery, whereas the things that they telegraph and then people say, oh man, I was able to guess it. Yes, you weren't able to guess it out of whole cloth. You were able to guess it because they dropped hints. So it didn't show up out of whole cloth, because that would be bad writing. They want to drop some hints so that you can piece it together in a rewatch, or you can piece it together when you're watching it immediately. So there are certain things that they're dropping where you can piece it together as you're watching it because you have more information than the characters in the show. Mm-hmm. That's not bad writing. That's just telegraphing certain things so the audience can follow the plot.
This scene really reminded me of Palpatine, where he's doing all this mind trick on Osha.
I don't think that he's really messing with her mind. He is seducing her, and there's levels to the seduction, right? There's the obvious, like him being naked seduction, but there's also like seducing her and making her feel better about herself. He knows her. Unlike May, she's had the experience that he had, right? She was a Jedi. He knows what it feels like to be rejected by the Jedi. So maybe she thought she was never good enough. She had that drummed into her because she wasn't able to meet up to their standards. And they make you feel like their standards are their entire world. Saying things like that are seductive to her. So like, I can see myself in a different way. I don't have to be as small as they made me feel.
And they said that it was Unknown Planet, but it looked very much like Octo from Force Awakens.
People have been saying that, but I don't know. We'll find out, or they'll tell us at some point. Maybe we'll find out in a later season or at the end of this season if it's Octo. But it's not shot in the same island in our world as Octo. It's a completely different island.
It's a very good thing that the writers did to open up this mystery, whether or not she is going to be seduced, whether or not she turned to the dark side, even though she is pretty strong with, oh yeah, that leads to the dark side, and there's another layer that's underneath there, what the stranger was talking about.
Yeah, but the thing is that she's just repeating what she was taught. How much she actually cares. There's like indoctrination at a certain point with education until you start to think for yourself. And some people never get to that place when they start to think for themselves and try to interrogate some of the things that they're taught. And on a certain level, you have to teach kids things not dogmatically, but by rote, until they're able to actually interrogate the ideas that you teach them. And there's certain people that, like I said, never interrogate those ideas. And I think there's just things she's regurgitating that the Jedi have told her, but as she's turning these ideas around in her head, maybe she's thinking, maybe that's just their view of the world. Maybe what their view of the world isn't necessarily true. And I really appreciate them examining that, because we've seen in Star Wars books and also full-on movies and the shows as well, the Jedi are often wrong. Their view of the world is often error. That's why they lost to the Sith Lord. They're too rigid. And that's why you see Ahsoka trying to find the middle way, maybe trying to rediscover the Wayfinder sort of Jedis who are more gray and less black and white. So yeah, they're not right all the time. They present themselves as virtuous, but they're not right. So.
Speaking of not right, Sol here was trying to communicate with the High Council here, and it seems as though there's a lot of burden that's on Sol right now, and we'll see that later on, that he goes into hyperspace before Venestra arrives. And this is one of the things that perplexes me, is what did he do? Is he good? Did he do something wrong? We don't really know. And it's like, through this, you question his moral compass in a lot of ways. It's so fascinating, but it's also perplexing, and also can be so irritating because it gets to the story and you're like, you're left off, like you're still guessing as to what's going on.
Yeah, I think we'll get answers next week. It's interesting to juxtapose his approach to May and the stranger's approach to Osha, where the stranger is doing the soft sell. The ship's right there. You can swim across if you want to get to it. And he actually straps her down. Like he doesn't have a soft approach to her. So he has the more villainous, forceful way of talking to her. Also, I feel like he feels that once he tells her the truth, if she wanted to kill him before, she's going to really want to kill him afterwards. So maybe that's why he's strapping her down.
Yeah, exactly. And Basil actually survived the whole massacre there in episode 5. Somehow he gets back on the ship, and here we can see that he is trying to repair Pip. And we know that later on Pip gets factory settings. I can't believe that she used the word factory settings in that regard, because you kind of get used to like factory settings on your television. It was a weird placement of words.
Sure, but it pulled me out for a second. Then I realized that there have been several factories in Star Wars lore. Not even if you don't even have to go to the books. There was a factory in Andor, a slave factory, but it was a factory. And there was a factory in the Solo film. That's where they were making ships or something like that. So there have been factories. I think there was a droid factory in like the last season of The Mandalorian as well.
Right.
You saw Ugnaught repairing droids and things like that. So factory is a word that hasn't come up before.
I do actually give credit. There was a very comedic moment with Basil. Basically, was he biting her? No.
Yeah, he did some karate moves and around, and then he attacked her and stepped on her leg, and then Pip sprayed her in her face as well.
Yeah. So. Then we figured out that Sol. Now this is a question, whether or not he knew at the beginning, or was it he knew when they were talking to her? That she was Bae.
He didn't know at the beginning. I don't think so. I think when he embraced her and said, "You saved me." Basically, he was thanking her from saving him from himself, because he was going to lash out and kill the stranger out of anger. But yeah, at that point, I don't think he knew. But after she went and she checked on the stuff, when she got attacked by Basil and Pip, and she came back and she was like, "Oh, you found Pip," but also saw that Pip's eyes were red, and also her responses were a little bit off. That's when he was starting to think, "Oh, okay." And then when he stunned her, you also see Basil coming behind him. So Basil just confirmed his suspicions. I think he told him. Mm-hmm. But he was already starting to get suspicious when he was having the conversation with her. So it's probably half the time. But he was in his feelings. You show up to a planet rolling like 8 of them, 8 deep, and you're the only one who survives.
Yeah.
You're going to be upset. Like, a Jedi is not supposed to be upset. But that's another thing that we're learning about. Soul is a more interesting Jedi, a Jedi who dips into the darkness, which is what the stranger was talking about last week. Is what have you done with your darkness? He's not suppressing it as well as other Jedis. He also has more attachments than other Jedis because Vanestra tries to push him on that at the beginning of the season. Oh, are you going to be okay going after Osha? Or are your personal attachments? So he pretends, I'll be professional. I'm fine. But I think he feels things more than he's supposed to as a Jedi Master. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think of Vanestra? Because I think that she's definitely has, figuratively speaking, blood on her hands as well in this tragic story that happened on Brendok. Do you think that she is a little bit more suppressing her darkness, or is she is just trying to play along with the crowd?
I don't think she has anything to do with Brendok. I think that she is duplicitous and calculating, and she's evil in a different way. Darkness can show up in different shades, and I would appreciate it if they don't tie her to Brendok and just show that they were wrong for what they did in Brendok, but she's a different kind of wrong. She's a political manipulator. She's probably going to pin all those deaths on Soul. That's the sort of person that she is, because she's trying to protect the order from outside political forces. They give you enough information in all these episodes to figure out where people are going to go. That's why she got that phone call from that senator saying, oh, the Senate wants to do an internal investigation of the Jedi. But there's nothing to worry about. The Jedi have always been forthcoming, and we know as an audience that they haven't been. So she's worried about that. That's her deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this was very interesting. She has a purple lightsaber. We haven't seen that since Mace Windu. But also it's the whip. And from there, you put two and two together that she might have been the master to the stranger's Padawan.
Right.
Yeah, so that could have been the connection there. Definitely a good effect. Definitely something novel that we haven't seen in Star Wars before. Kudos to them for trying something.
We haven't seen it on screen, but we've seen it before. We've seen whips in the cartoon, but this is the first time we've seen it in live action. And this is the first time we've seen it with a Jedi. But yeah, she has this as her novel weapon as a younger Jedi in the High Republic books. Yeah.
And then finally, we see toward the end, the stranger was really hinting at Osha, hey, try on the helmet. It's lightsaber proof and proof of not getting Jedi mind tricked. And toward the end, she actually put the helmet on, and we see it from her perspective, which was really interesting. Do you think that she's being seduced and leading down that dark path, or do you think that she's just curious?
I think she's curious, but I also think it'd be interesting if she's the one who turns evil, just because May hates the Jedi from a distant and academic way because they showed up and then her family died, but Osha can hate them for a more specific reason. Like she was around them and maybe they made her feel small and made her feel less than because she wasn't able to become one of them. And then she also might find out that they were the reason that her family died as well. Yeah, I think she might have at the end of the season more of a reason to become dark than May. So
okay. Yeah, that's how it ended there. And they left that scene where she put on the helmet and she's seeing through the eyes. And it was a good 5-10 seconds before they cut to black, and it was weird.
They do cut back to the external view of her with the mask on, and then they focus on her breathing, which is very similar to Darth's breathing as well.
Right, yeah. Interesting. So what do you think is going to happen in the next episode?
I have no idea. This is why I'm looking forward to the next episode. There's all kinds of things that could happen. There are all kinds of theories, but I think we get some answers about Soul. We get some answers about what the people did on Brendok. I feel like Carrie-Anne Moss's character is going to be the one who led the charge of whatever they did that was terrible, because she seemed the least repentant about that. Everyone else is torn up. Konaka was torn up. Torben went into hibernation and also killed himself. Soul seems to be very affected by this as well. So whatever she ordered them to do, they did because they were following orders, and they all paid a moral price for it. It's possible that the witches were doing some shady stuff. Maybe they were creating these children to take their bodies eventually, and the Jedis knew that. Or maybe they weren't doing some shady stuff. Maybe they feel like they should be the only people who can wield the Force, which is some BS, because if we go by what we've learned, the Force is like a natural resource. Everyone should be able to tap into it. Yeah.
That's what we think about Star Wars The Acolyte Episode 6. Tell us what you have to say about this episode and about the show overall. Please comment down below. Share, subscribe for more content like this. And we will see you in the next video. All right, take care, everybody.